I'd like to backtrack a little bit. In recent videos, in recent verses, things got a bit philosophical. In other words, there's an attempt to try and establish conceptually what is revealed through transcendental insight. You can't really do this, but it's often tempting to have a go. And the Lankavatara Sutra itself, in some recent verses, made an attempt. And this attempt falls flat in its face. The conceptual arguments, the philosophical arguments, were very feeble indeed. And I tried to give some of my own as well, which hopefully had a little bit more impact. But there's one thing I missed out, and that was the scientific evidence. When the scientific spirit is pursued rigorously into the nature of reality, then it undermines its own assumptions about there being a physical external reality out there. And this is most clearly revealed in a field of science, field of physics known as quantum mechanics. And I've got a few quotes here, maybe not the best quotes, but they give some indication that this common understanding of the world is erroneous. The understanding assumed by scientists is erroneous. There's a quote here from Werner Heisenberg. The only thing that can accurately describe an elementary particle is a probability function that, in itself, contains nothing about the quality of being or the physical existence of that particle. So when we pursue the assumption that things are made up of elementary particles, we find that these elementary particles disappear. They disappear into mathematical abstractions known as probability waves. But here's another one from Niels Bohr. The common sense view of the world in terms of objects that really exist out there, independently of our observations, totally collapses in the face of the quantum factor. Well, this is referring to a particular experiment known as the double slit experiment. And the result depends on whether the experiment is observed or not. I'll say more about that in a minute. And here's a quote from Albert Einstein to do with the nature of space. Hence it is clear that the space of physics is not, in the last analysis, anything given in nature or independent of human thought. It is a function of our conceptual scheme. In other words, space is a function of the mind. Here's another one from Einstein. Reality is merely an illusion, albeit a very persistent one. And here's another quote from Eugene Wigner, who was a Nobel Prize winner. It will remain remarkable in whatever way our future concepts may develop, that the very study of the external world led to the scientific conclusion that the content of the consciousness is the ultimate universal reality. Well, I wouldn't say the content of the consciousness, I would just say consciousness. But they're on that track, I took these quotes from a lecture which is available on video by Tom Campbell. I'll put the link to the video in the notes below if you're interested. He goes into something called the double slit experiment, and I won't go into it because he explains it better than I could, and he's more qualified to do so. He also conveys the ramifications of the double slit experiment. it totally demolishes the notion of a consistent external world, a consistent external reality. And he himself, in this video, goes on to talk about consciousness. And it's all very fascinating. I'm not sure how useful it is to the Enlightenment practitioner, because he conceptualizes consciousness. Although he makes it quite clear there's no objective physical reality, he still assumes that there's different consciousnesses. Consciousness, my consciousness, your consciousness, and somehow these consciousnesses are interacting. So it's all very fascinating, and but as Enlightenment practitioners, we want to realize, we want to practice realizing the nature of consciousness for ourselves, and not get caught up in further conceptualizations, as fascinating as these might be. So, the arguments that undermine the belief in an external physical world are perhaps most solidly expressed through science itself, particularly quantum mechanics. And Tom Campbell, whose video I mentioned, he describes all of this as a virtual reality, a simulation of some sort. Which is fine, although I think I prefer the ones we're getting in the text to do with what was in the previous verse described reality as like the city of the Gandharvas, a dream, and Maya. The point is to stop taking our cue from this idea of a physical external reality, and to come back to realization of the nature of our own consciousness. And this isn't something vague or conceptual. Consciousness is awareness. It's what's happening right now. It's what's happening in you right now, as you listen to this, as you hear these words, as you engage with certain thoughts, awareness of certain sensations. You come back to this. You come back to a sense of being, a sense of who you really are. And it's something you might remember from when you were a little child. This sense of being that you were gradually drawn away from as you were educated, as you grew up, as you matured. You were constantly and gradually pulled away from this. And I think this is why music is so vital, especially to young people. It's a way of resisting this, because music brings us back. Music isn't concerned with an external world. It brings us back, or at least it points us once more in the direction of our own sense of being. Yeah, I've often wondered why music is so important, especially to young people. Music is such a drug for young people, because I think it does counterbalance this siphoning off of our sense of being, which education entails. In fact, I think even the word education, if I remember correctly, comes from the Latin educare. Educare, it means to bring out. think this is normally understood in a positive way as bringing out your innate potential, developing your innate potential. No, what it means is it's siphoning off your sense of being, bringing it, coalescing it into this reality, this conventional reality of a world out there, and a me here, and this me here who's got to make the most of that world out there. So as enlightenment practitioners, we disinvest in this process and come back to our sense of being once again. So I'll continue with the next verse in the next video.